Hi, how are you? How you doing? You're very welcome. I know it's been a long time. If you're new here, I'm Liz Kengonzi, and if you're old, thank you for coming back. Please don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share. Yeah, today our small topic, but very important, is boundaries in any relationship you're in, whether it is family relationship, whether it is love relationship, whether it is father mother, that's still family, but whichever relationship you're in, it's very important to have boundaries. Boundaries are key because at the end of the day, each one of us gets offended when those boundaries are not kept in order. Even a child, a baby, if their boundaries are crossed, you'll see them show you that now you're overstepping, please back up. So, what are boundaries? Boundaries. This is a limit mark. It states where you start and where you stop. These are learned from a very early stage of our lives. A child from birth, they start to learn that this is where people should stop, this is where people should start. So this is a limit mark. And each one of us, we have boundaries. Don't mistake yourself. Say, me, anywhere. No, you also have boundaries. What are some of the forms of boundaries? We have different forms of boundaries. And the first one is the healthy boundaries. These are boundaries which are good enough. They're just good boundaries. And in any good boundary, that means people can access when they have to, and they can fail to access when they don't have to. That's one type. Another type of boundary is the one where they are too loose. The boundaries are too loose in that everybody gets in. Everybody gets in. That's too loose. Second form of boundary. The third form are the ones which are too rigid. The boundary is too rigid that nobody can ever get in. Even getting out is not easy. So that's the third form. The three examples I could give is a house. Every house, we can just picture a house in your head. Every house has boundaries, or every piece of land has a boundary whereby this is where you start, this is where you stop. If this is where I start and my neighbor ever crosses, they are now into my territory. And you guys know how the land things are. That can be chaotic to a point of death. So same thing in our relationships. If this is where I start, this is where I stop. If you ever cross over, we shall have some chaos, including death. An example of a very rigid boundary is like a castle. You've seen castles, maybe in movies, or maybe some of us have castles in our villages. A castle is whereby a boundary wall is taller than the house. It's so tall, it's so thick that nothing can get in. Nobody can even peep on top to see. No one even knows what happens inside. That's a too rigid boundary, because as hard as it is for other people to come in, it's also hard for you to get out. What this limits, it limits a lot in our relationships. That's why it's too rigid. Then too loose is whereby there's no boundary wall. You've seen those houses. The house is there, everyone is sitting in the living room, even someone on the road can see through the window to the bedroom. That's too loose. That means anybody who wants to come will come in. You have no restriction. The one that's healthy, the healthy boundaries, is whereby there's a tall enough yet short enough boundary wall. Of course, in our different lives, we all define what is healthy for us. But most of us, unfortunately, we found ourselves restricting these levels of boundaries based on our upbringing, on our wounds, on our fears, on our background. And most of us have built very high and tall boundaries. And these boundaries are what are some of the reasons we're having issues connecting with our close friends, with our relatives, with even our children, later on our parents. So a healthy boundary is whereby you can see what's inside, but yet restrict enough who gets in. Everyone who wants to get out can get out, but there's a level of restriction. So I'll compare that to a home which has a low level boundary wall. It's not that everyone can jump over, yet it's not that people are confined inside like a castle. Yeah. What is the importance of healthy boundaries? The responsibility within every relationship becomes balanced when they are healthy boundaries. Most times when the boundaries are not restricted or they are not clear enough, there is a tendency for us to feel burnt out, and we develop resentment for the other person, because there's always a lot of trespass, a lot of unclear grounds, a lot of gray areas, a lot of overlapping things. So before you know it, somebody is feeling overburdened, someone is feeling uncomfortable. There's a lot of things that come up because of unclear boundaries. But when you have healthy boundaries, there's that balance between the responsibility in the relationship. The other importance is that it increases the understanding of the other person. You think about it, me as Elizabeth, if let's say the relationship between my workmates or the relationship between my children, if they know, if Elizabeth, this is where she starts, this is where she stops, that helps them understand me more. Because most times as we identify these boundaries, we get to know the reasons why and the reasons behind it. So as we identify and make boundaries clear, by making a boundary clear, I'm still using the example of a home. If you make the boundary clear that this is where my land starts, there's clear understanding. Everyone who comes will say, that's where Mr. So-and-so starts from. So it makes things so much easier and much, much better. Just like the physical boundaries, the healthy boundaries in any relationship, they help us to protect and control access within our inner spaces. Like I said, even from a childhood level, whereby a child is 1 day old, 2 days old, they also have their personal space where they don't want particular people to start to intrude. So in that personal space, it helps us to protect it and control the access. Particular people should get into this level. Particular people should do ABCD, which is very helpful, and it increases our level of security and safe stay in the world and in the relationship at all as a whole. What are the types of boundaries? We looked at the forms, the 3 forms, the healthy, the rigid, and the too loose. Now we are looking at the types of boundaries. We have the physical boundaries, whereby physical boundary. Then emotional boundaries. We have the sexual boundaries. We have the intellectual boundaries and the financial boundaries. Physical boundaries refer to the body, privacy, personal space kind of thing. I don't like people hugging me. I don't like people touching my arms, like those physical attributes. That's where we call the physical boundaries. Sharing your personal boundaries can improve your relationship a lot. You know what you are and what you're not comfortable with. So it's very important to communicate some of these boundaries. We need to know them, that's number one, and we need to communicate them to our partners or whoever we are in a relationship with, so that they respect them. Like we said, they need to be clear for them to be honored and for you to protect your space. If you need time to decompose after work before socializing with others, set a boundary around this. Like, that's something that it's only you who knows what you need, and it's only you who can set it that way, so that other people start to respect something like that. Doing this will keep you from feeling drained, resentful of the people around you. So that's one type of physical boundary. Yes, physical boundaries. These are very, very key in any relationship. There are people I've heard where they say, if the man slaps me, I will leave. That's a boundary. For them, that's something you don't cross over. That's something you can't do. And then there are others, even if he beats me, I'll stay. That's their boundary. So we need to define our boundaries, and we need to know them. Emotional boundaries. In order to establish emotional boundaries, you need to be in touch with your feelings, because this is more about how we feel. In us, how do we feel? Healthy emotional boundaries require you to know where you end and where your partner begins. If your partner is upset and you notice yourself sharing this feeling, a boundary might be needed. Notice when you feel guilty, ashamed, upset, undervalued. Boundaries might be needed when you notice these feelings coming up around certain issues. It's very important for us to get in touch with our feelings, because most of these, if they go undealt with, that's how you see people exploding and doing abnormal things. If you're upset and your partner tries to fix it, you could feel as if your partner isn't hearing you, and before you know it, you're rumbling shoulders, and your partner might be just trying to help you I'm trying to help you. Guys, I see this a lot with my husband. I'm rambling, not because I want you to fix it. You know, I just want you to listen to my emotions. So in the process, we end up arguing that he's doing the wrong thing. He gets being frustrated that he's trying to help, I'm not listening, you see. But we need to define more of these boundaries so that, yeah, of late, because of communication and a lot of things, he's starting to understand that. In that, sometimes he asks me, do you want me to give you a solution, or you just want to talk it through? I tell him, this time I just want to talk it through. And we find ourselves a lot of arguing just because we've defined an emotional boundary. Yeah, so it's very, very key for us to define emotional boundaries. I've seen lots of people and lots of relationships in my life end because of failure to respect emotional boundaries. I keep quiet about it, and I start to resent the person, and before you know it, I'm dodging them and I no longer want to see them. Yeah, not because they are terrible people or I'm a terrible person, but just because we've not defined where they start, where I stop, where things be. And the ones who have really defined those emotions have found ourselves having a healthier relationship with those people. Yeah, so I'll give you an example. This is not to roast the person in any way. I have a friend of mine. Yeah, she knows herself. When she hears this story, she'll know. I have a friend of mine. She's very she's an amazing person with an amazing heart. So one time she came and she was playing with my child, but though she was playing with my firstborn, you know how sensitive you be on your firstborn. She was playing with my child in a particular way, and my emotions were hurt, you guys. You know, it's your baby, it's your firstborn, you be delicate over everything. Anyway, so I was so hurt, but that very moment I showed her I'm not happy. But I gathered myself later and I called her and I gave her the peace of my mind of how my emotions were. I think that was the first person in my life that I poured my whole self to. I gave her a peace of my mind. I told her this. Not like in an insulting way, but I told her how everything made me feel and how I don't want to ever feel that again. I remember I could hear her voice. It broke her because she didn't intend to do that. So she kept quiet for some days. I was so sure the relationship is gone, done and dead. But you guys, I can tell you the truth right now. That is among my very closest people. Why? Because I defined the boundaries. From that day, actually she told me, you know what, Liz, I didn't know that this could hurt you this much. If I knew, I would not have done it. She explained to me where she was coming from, and I got it, like honestly got it. And I forgave her, and now our relationship is much better. So some of these things, we need to define them, and the more you define them, the more you make them clear, you make your relationship much better. Sexual boundaries. Sexual boundaries refer to your expectations around physical intimacy, what is and isn't okay with you sexually. This is very important in marriages. Yeah, if you're in a sexual relationship and a committed relationship, that's marriage. Please define your sexual boundaries, because keeping quiet and letting someone walk all over your boundary wall creates resentment. Before you know it, that's how you find people, I never enjoy anything. Why? Because a lot of resentment has come up. So we need to define our sexual boundaries. Tell the person, this is how far I can go. When you do this, this is how it, I don't like that, I like that, let's do this, let's compromise here, let's do. Yeah, so it's very good to tell somebody where you start, where you stop. There are things one person might enjoy, another person might not, and it's okay because you're different people. But it's important that we define these things. If you were sexually abused in the past, and there's something that actually triggers you every time he does it, there's no point in you keeping quiet, because you'll hate the person. Before you know it, your marriage is ending over something. Tell him, every time you do this, you trigger me because the abuser did this to me when he was abusing me. So we need to explain, and we need to be open to our people. And when the person is being vulnerable to you and telling you such boundaries, let's not jump in to convince them. We have a tendency to try and pull them to our side. Not we are selfish humans. You want to, let me change you, let me transform you, let me change you, become like me, since I'm perfect, you know. Yeah, so we need to listen to our spouses and partners so that we understand where their limits are and we respect them to the level of our ability, to the best of our ability. At the end of the day, this is sex. You need to enjoy it, both of you, because it's a beautiful thing created for your marriage for pleasure. Yeah, and other reasons, but pleasure is also one of the key reasons the Lord gave us the gift. So please, let's respect sexual boundaries. Get time. There's a video about communication and setting time and having meetings and discussing and evaluating our relationships. Get time and evaluate what are those sexual boundaries. What do you think I've defied on? What do you think I've... And then let's apologize. I'm sorry, I didn't know. If I knew, I wouldn't have abused that level. I wouldn't have overstepped that boundary, you know. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. But now that I've told you, what can we do? How can we be better with each other within our boundaries? Intellectual boundaries. Intellectual boundaries encompass ideas and beliefs, and these are boundaries around showing respect for different views and ideas. I'm laughing because I'm not good at these boundaries. I do not like clever people. Neither do I like dull people. Anyway, so I like people to be as clever as me. Yeah, which is not a very humble thing. Yeah, the Lord is still working on me. But respecting someone's intellectual levels, that this is where they start, this is where they stop, it's a sign of humility. That's one. But also it is something that develops the relationship in ways each one of us will testify about when we start respecting this. Talking down to someone, that one we all know is bad. Or treating them as though they are not as smart enough to understand what you're trying to say. Yeah. We need to define intellectual boundaries and to respect them. Everyone is smart in their own way. And it's okay for people to be smarter than you. It's okay for someone to have a different view than you. It is very, very okay. If you feel as though you can't discuss certain topics with your partner because you believe they don't respect your opinion or put you down, a boundary might be needed. That's a sign. If you restrict yourself in particular things, that's a sign that there's a boundary that needs to be defined. When you're afraid to share your views and opinions because your partner's response might get you hurt or upset. That's how things go under the rug. Before you know it, you're having lots of difficulties from lots of unsaid things. So we need to define intellectual boundaries, but also pray to God for the grace in these boundaries, guys, because there are things which don't make sense to me. And to accept that those things that don't make sense, it needs the grace of God. So we need to pray a lot in these boundaries, but talk a lot. Talk. And talk. Never get tired to talk with your person. So in any intimate relationship, talk as much as you can so that you define these boundaries and they become clear to your person and to you. Financial boundaries. Another tough one. Financial boundaries are all about money. Boundaries around joint versus separate accounts, how much goes into saving, what purchases do you want to make, and how much discretion of funds will each of you have. How far can I spend? How far can I not spend? What is mine? What is ours? What is yours? Like respecting those levels of boundaries is very, very key. Most of us have done all this, but in assumption. Just because I went to Senana and I bought things of 100,000 and he got mad, then I will assume, what do I think? What did that madness come from? I think he wanted me to buy things of 95. Next time I try 95, I see him not mad. I'm like, okay. That means my limit is, let's not only assume, because sometimes you find we have misinterpreted things. We have assumed lots of stuff which bring chaos later and all those things. So let's try and define financial boundaries. Discussions about financials are key. I mentioned this in the video about communication and the meetings. You need to have a day when you're just talking about finances. You're like, you know what, I feel free here, I feel tied up here, I feel very weird here, I feel ABCD. I came into a marriage where I was thinking, I really had this mentality that the woman needs her own independence because that's the only security I have. If he kicks me out of the home tomorrow, the only security I have is my money. That's the mentality I came with. So I was ready to fight for my place and my money. So when you come with that kind of attitude, it's very hard to hear things of sharing, to hear things of let's do this, let's do that. And that rigidity is what brings us a lot of fights in the process. Before you know it, you're hiding things, you're doing very ungodly things, all for what? Because you want your space. But when you bring out such boundaries, such limits, and you tell your person, you know what, I want to be independent financially, so how can we do it together without me offending you or stealing from you or hiding stuff from you? So before you know it, your relationship is much better. I would gladly say that that is not the case for me now. I still get episodes whereby I really want money that's mine to be somewhere. But that's something we continue to talk about with my husband in the meetings we have, and then we try to discuss why I'm feeling the insecurity to a point of, keeping things, what can be done better. Yeah, the adventures have gone in alone because that's what helps me. I cannot survive without having something of my own, you see. So at least he knows about it, that's how I am. But the ability for him to respect something like that takes the grace of God, like I told you guys. So please, we need to speak and speak up. Yeah, so what are the steps to build healthy boundaries? The first, number one step is that you listen to this video. Yeah, number one step is that you study about healthy boundaries. After this video, Google up something, try to read up, study about healthy boundaries. How can I create health? What do healthy boundaries look like? Begin by practicing in minor areas. Just try and slowly start practicing some of these things. You're like, okay, I want to build boundaries in our sex life. You start with a small point and see how that goes. Start as a couple, do it together, because sometimes doing the things alone might not be as successful as we think. Begin by practicing, then go in a mirror, talk to yourself. You're like, you know what? Me, Elizabeth, I don't like ABCD. It sounds funny the first time you laugh. Like, me, Elizabeth, I don't like ABCD. Within 10 times, you realize, actually, that makes sense. As Elizabeth, I don't like to do this. And it will give you confidence when people, next time there are 10 people around, it's easy for you to say, you know what, this is it. Why? Because you practice in a mirror over and over again, so that you do what? You get. Practice with people that love you. Go to your siblings. I have some foolish siblings who I go to and tell all the junk. Go to that one. Tell them. They will laugh, they'll make fun, they'll what, but at least you're conquering your fears. Then you keep expanding your circle. Before you know it, the whole world will know Elizabeth does not like ABCD. Move to other people. And remember that healthy people will respect your boundaries. That's the other thing. Guys, the only people who don't respect our boundaries are unhealthy people. And we carry that on us as if our boundaries are the wrong ones. No, my boundary is not wrong, because it is my boundary. It's me that set it, not you, for me. So healthy people will get it. Oh, okay. But unhealthy people will fight it. So never give a damn on unhealthy people. Set your boundaries, stick to it. Not that we should disrespect others, but let's set it knowing that there are people who fight it, and they're not fighting it because of the boundary in itself. They're fighting it because of their own issues. Yeah. Be calm, be firm, be direct. It's okay to say, me, Liz, I don't like going out. Okay, I like going out. I'm just giving an example. I don't like going out. I don't like drinking. It's okay. I know someone will laugh because it doesn't make sense to them. But be firm, be calm, be direct. If you get scared and ashamed, remember, others do it too. You're never alone. There's no boundary that has not been set in this world. Put any boundary in Google and see how many people have done it. There are so many people. So if others have set that boundary and are succeeding and they're happy, then you can too. So every time you get ashamed or scared, please remember others have done it. You're not responsible for other people's feelings towards your boundary. 100%. And this is not being prideful or anything. These boundaries are there for a reason. There's a reason you set that boundary. As long as it's a healthy reason. It's not something you seek, you need help over. So that's why we need mentors in lives and people to journey with us. They can easily tell you, that boundary is based from a wound you went through from your past. It's not a healthy boundary. Set healthy boundaries, and the people around us can help us to notice that that boundary is healthy. And don't mind what it causes other people. If I drink, their people will be sad. If I don't drink, their people will be sad. So what should Liz do? You see, I cannot base my boundary on other people's feelings. We need to keep that in mind. Please, let's set healthy boundaries. It's possible. Let's evaluate our boundaries every now and then. Try and see what is it I've done, what is it I've not done. You're very welcome, guys, to subscribe. Please subscribe. Yeah, subscribe, share. I know a lot of you are watching my videos. I see the views are quite many, but subscriptions are few. Maybe because I'm not asking. please subscribe. I love you guys. God bless you. Yeah, Kali. Bye.